Mr. Harris here, and welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to talk about how cells are able to divide, grow, and finally differentiate. I'll talk more about differentiate later on, what it means. However, before we begin, I want you to look at this diagram. I'm pretty sure you're wondering, is this the same baby? And then it grew up bigger and stronger? The answer is yes. And how is this possible? This is due to a process called cell division. Cell division, simply put, is the number of cells increasing. So how does cell division actually work? So let's have a look. So you have a cell over here, and if you recall, this is the nucleus, and inside the nucleus we have DNA. So what the cell does during cell division, before it actually, is it tries to make a copy of itself. So DNA and nucleus, they'll make a copy. So you can just imagine, just like how some of you know about copy and pasting, copy and paste, Control C, Control V, the keyboard shortcut. The same thing. It's the same thing what the cell does. The cell will make a copy over here. For example, this was the original one, and then it would paste the same nucleus with the same DNA over here. So DNA, remember it has the DNA inside. It's the same. All right. Afterwards, now that the nucleus is divided into two, the cytoplasm will start to divide as well. It will divide into two equal parts. All right. And then afterwards, slowly but surely, two cells will be formed because the cell membrane would also be separated. For example, over here, I'm highlighting this cell, the blue cell. This is one cell, and then you have another cell formed over here, the green one. So these cells could also undergo cell division. For example, this cell over here, it would start to make a copy of a nucleus. So you have one nucleus over here, and this is the other nucleus. Okay, and then afterwards, what happens? The cytoplasm would start to separate. Okay, and one nucleus would be over here, and the other one would be over here. And then afterwards, you would notice that there will be two cells formed again. And this process could repeat and repeat and repeat, and then you'll have so many different cells being formed. Okay, so that is how we grow bigger and stronger and older. So I'll talk more about what happens to these cells later on. For that, now that we have cells, they're not differentiated right now. They're undifferentiated. It means they don't have any specific role or function. So we need to undergo a process called cell differentiation in order to give it a function. So cell differentiation means to give the cell a role or a particular function. So for example, this cell over here, it could either become a muscle cell, or it could become a red blood cell, or it could even become a nerve cell. All right. So cell differentiation is the process of giving an undifferentiated cell a particular role. So far, let's summarize what we have learned. New cells are formed by a process called, yes, cell division. Cells become specialized for particular functions in a process called, what's the process called? It's a long name. Yes, cell differentiation. Okay. Now you may ask me, Mr. Harris, well, what's the point of having so many cells? Okay, for example, we have a lot of muscle cells. So what? If we have a lot of epithelial cells, all right, these are cells that are on the outer surface. So, for example, on the skin. So, what's the big deal about having so many of these cells? What happens? So, these cells that work together, for example, you have a bunch of muscle cells over here, or you have a bunch of epithelial cells. When you have a bunch of them, we could call them tissue. So you have muscle tissue over here, and you have epithelial tissue over here. And if you have a lot of tissues, for example, you have a lot of muscle tissues, and you have a lot of epithelial tissues over here, when they combine together, when they work together, you have an organ. So an example of an organ is stomach. So you notice the pattern. So originally you had one cell. So after you have a lot of, for example, muscle cells, you get muscle tissue. And after you get a lot of muscle tissues, and for example, you have epithelial tissues, you can have an organ. So for a stomach, of course, in the stomach you have some muscle tissue over here. Let me use a different color. These are muscle tissues, and there are some epithelial cells because on the outermost layer of the stomach. Of course, all of you know that there's not only one organ, there are different organs in our human body. So different organs, when they work together, we call them they function as a system. So for example, we have a digestive system that you have learned in primary school. For the digestive system, you have the stomach over here. What else do you have? You have, for example, this is the liver. You also have the intestine. So all of these are organs, and when they work together, you have the digestive system. So all these systems, for example, you have the digestive system, respiratory systems, so on and so forth. There are many different systems. We'll talk about them later on. They work together to maintain life of a human, to maintain life of us all. So if you notice, let me go back. Originally, we had one single cell. However, when you combine them together, you have tissues. When you combine different tissues together, you have an organ. When you combine different organs together, you have a system. And when you combine different systems, for example, just now we saw a digestive system, we have the respiratory system. When you combine different systems together, you have the systems working together to maintain life of a human body. All right, so just to wrap up, just now I showed you the levels of organization. So the levels of organization in most living things are, from a cell, you get, what is it? Yes, you get tissues. And from tissues, you get organ. So the cell is the smallest level of organization, and the living thing will be the highest. So it goes in a flow. So from cell, tissue, organ, and from organs you get a system. And finally, when there are many systems together working together, you're able to maintain life of a living thing. All right? So this concept is quite interesting to understand. It shows how the human dynamic works. Hopefully, this video has helped you understand this better. All right, so this is the end of this video. I'll see you again in the next one. Bye.